vagabond girl up a millionaire from among the trash. But the way he behaved showed what kind of person he is. Miracles rarely come to the city dump, but it was there that the story began, which would later be called one of the strangest and most high-profile investigations of the year. If not for chance, billionaire Antonio White would have died in the garbage. And the girl he first saw through cloudy eyelids, a homeless woman named Jane, became not just his savior, but someone much more. This is a story about trust, betrayal, and how two worlds, the streets and high society, collided in a moment that changed everything. The smell of the dump was especially pungent in the morning. Jane couldn't smell it anymore, like so many other things. When you live on the streets for more than a year, your nose, your tastes, your notions of what's normal are erased. She walked between piles of garbage, covered in gray steam, in old men's sneakers that were a size too big. Los Angeles was waking up, but its morning hadn't reached here. Plastic bags rustled under boots, empty bottles rolled with footsteps, a seagull cried somewhere. Jane moved methodically to search the back of the site, where the big supermarkets dumped their written-off products. Sometimes there were dented cans or half-broken appliances that could be exchanged for food. She came early today. The cold was creeping under the jacket she had been given for Christmas by a church charity. She had wrapped a scarf around herself, leaving only her eyes exposed. She was about to go back when she noticed something strange. A human hand was sticking out from behind a container of furniture debris. At first she froze. The hand was dirty, motionless, but terribly familiar in shape. Jane looked around. There was not a soul around. Slowly, very slowly, she approached. He was lying on his side, facing the ground. A man, dressed in an expensive but dirty suit. On his wrist was a silver watch. The skin on his face was pale, his lips slightly blue. There was blood on his head, as if he had been hit with something heavy. He was breathing intermittently and weakly. "Hey," she whispered, touching his shoulder. "Are you alive?" No reaction, but there is breathing. Jane acted quickly. Everything in her screamed, "Stay away! This is none of your business!" But she had already covered him with her jacket and was looking for somewhere to drag him. He wouldn't survive outside. He'd freeze or be finished off. Jane had one option, an old van on the outskirts where she sometimes slept. Dragging a grown man, even in a semi-conscious state, was not so easy. She dragged him, stopping every 10 meters, sweating and feeling her back hurt. Several times she thought about giving up, but then she looked at his face and dragged him on. Almost 40 minutes later, he found himself inside the van. The old Ford with rusted doors sat between the containers, damp but somewhat protected. Jane laid him down on the mattress, covered him with a second blanket, and got out a bottle of water. He remained unconscious. There was a decent bump and abrasions on his head. She wiped his face with a wet napkin, checked his pulse and breathing in turn. Everything was there, but weak. She didn't know who he was. The thieving part of her mind said, "Look in your pockets." There was a wallet, almost empty, just credit cards, business cards, and a driver's license. She held the document up to the light. Antonio White. The name sounded familiar. Too familiar. And then Jane remembered. A few days ago, she had seen the name on the magazines scattered around the newsstand. The disappearance of Antonio White. Media mogul vanished under strange circumstances. Her fingers trembled. She closed her wallet and stared at the man's face. It was him. The millionaire. The owner of a news empire. And he was lying in her van. Beaten, barely alive. She could have called the police. shrugged, stepped aside, become the one who found it. But something stopped her. Intuition, the street. She felt that all this was unclean, and if he ended up here, it meant that someone benefited from him no longer being there. People like him don't just fall into landfills. Jane did not sleep all night. He began to come to his senses only in the morning. At first he groaned. Then he quietly asked, "Where am I?" "In a safe place," she answered briefly. "Did someone want to kill you?" He was silent for a long time. His eyes, dark and cloudy, tried to focus on her. Jane saw him trying to remember. "I don't know," he whispered. "The last thing I remember was dinner, Stephen, then darkness." "Who is Stephen?" He was silent again. Then he added quietly, "A friend. Was." Jane nodded. She didn't need more. Now she knew for sure. All this was not a coincidence. She found the man whom someone wanted to eliminate in a place where no one survives. And now she had to decide. Leave him, or get involved in a game in which she didn't even have chips. On the third day, Antonio could sit up. He ate almost nothing, drank little, still held his head, and looked at Jane with gratitude but wariness. He was in a strange, dirty van, in clothes that were already beginning to smell like garbage, without a phone and with holes in his memory. "Do you have a name?" he asked when she gave him water again. "Jane." "Just Jane? No last names needed here." He nodded. He was silent for a few seconds, then said quietly, "My name is Antonio White." She snorted. "Yes, I know. You lay next to me for almost 2 days. I could have taken the watch and the cards, but I didn't." He nodded again, as if it had been a surprise. He was having trouble breathing, his movements were labored, and his whole face betrayed an internal struggle, either with pain or with the fact that he was beginning to understand the situation he had gotten himself into. "Do you have enemies?" she asked directly. "Every rich man has enemies," he muttered. "But you know them by sight. And this Stephen, who is he?" "Partner. He was my friend from college. We built a business together." "He thought you were dead. His speech on TV," she hesitated, "was very convincing. As if you hadn't disappeared, but died." Antonio frowned. He tensed. For a few seconds he said nothing. Then he asked, "Are you sure?" "I'm not stupid. You have a concussion, a mark from being hit with something heavy. You were lying in a landfill like a bag of garbage, and someone really wanted you not to be found, especially alive." He closed his eyes. He clenched his teeth. Something in him changed. His gaze became harder, his voice quieter and more even. "I don't remember everything, but I remember one thing. Dinner. At Stephen's house. Wine. Then suddenly, darkness. That's it. No car, no road. I woke up in this." He looked around. "Place. I can try to find out what's going on. The city is talking about your death, but somehow your name disappears from the news too quickly. No one is looking for you. This is not normal." Antonio turned slowly towards her. "If you're right, and if he wanted to get rid of me, then I shouldn't show myself in public until I know everything. I need someone I can trust. Right now, it's only you." She laughed, briefly and nervously. "Do you trust a homeless girl who sleeps in a van?" "Precisely because you didn't take anything from me, and because you're not in this game. You're not from their world." He held out his hand. His hands were shaking. "Help me, Jane. I'm not asking forever. Just help me live until tomorrow." She looked at his palm, at the abrasions, at the thin strip of dried blood under his nail, and with unexpected calmness, she shook it. "Okay, but if you're lying, I'll be the first to turn you in." By evening, she had brought clothes, a men's sweatshirt and trousers from a second-hand store. She found a first aid kit, bandages, painkillers, an old SIM card, which she activated in the name of a random person, and a cheap push-button phone. "You will only speak to one person, your lawyer. Voice only, no video, and no locations." He didn't argue. Jane called from another phone, a landline a block away from the dump. She said, "The client is alive. We need to meet, but anonymously, without security. It's a matter of life and death." The lawyer, a man named Alan Morris, was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I will come." They met in an old auto repair shop on neutral territory. Alan, a short, neat man of about 50, recognized Antonio immediately, but kept his face. "You're presumed dead, Tony," he said. "Everyone's convinced you were killed in a robbery. The CCTV cameras in your house are missing, and the evidence points to an assault." Stephen arranged a closed casket funeral, and he signed papers to become acting CEO. "Without a body?" Antonio asked. "The body was found. In the river. Burnt. With your watch. DNA doesn't match, but the documents are sanitized. Everything looks clean." Jane stood nearby. Listening silently, she shuddered. "So he framed the body?" "It looks like it. But if you show up, everything will fall apart. You just have to prove that they wanted to get rid of you." "So let's start with the motive," Antonio said quietly. "What could he have had on his hands?" "You were going to sell some of your shares recently. You said you were tired. If you had disappeared, he would have become the rightful owner. Money is a classic." "But it's not just greed," Jane interjected. "He took you out almost perfectly. It's more like revenge." Alan looked at her with interest. "Who are you?" "The one who pulled him out of the trash," she answered calmly. "And now it seems she's up to her ears in it." Antonio looked at Alan and said, "I'll be back. But first we'll find out everything. Who, why, and why. And if Stephen is really involved, he'll pay." Alan nodded. As he left, he handed Jane a note with a code and an address. Temporary housing, a safe house in the northern part of the city. "Just the two of you. Don't tell anyone. It's safe to move here." And then we begin the hunt. When they found themselves in a new apartment, clean, with windows facing the alley and a closed entrance, Jane suddenly realized that she had not just helped. She had crossed the line, and there would be no going back. Antonio, sitting on the sofa, quietly said, "I don't know who you are, Jane, or what happened to you before, but now you are my only chance." She looked at him and replied, "And you, maybe, are mine." The apartment they now lived in was neither the caravan nor the mansions Antonio was used to. It was small, sparsely furnished, but quiet and clean. It smelled of washing powder, not damp. Jane still didn't feel at home, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't have to sleep in her shoes. Antonio was recovering. He was persistent, taking short walks around the room in the morning, reading the materials that Alan brought personally in paper folders. No computers, no electronics. They thought everything through, but Jane had an itch in her chest. Something was wrong. "Why didn't he just kill you?" she asked one evening. Antonio sat on the floor, leaning his back against the sofa with a cup of cheap instant coffee in his hand. Maybe he wanted to stage an accident, or he was afraid that the body would be found. It would have been easier to substitute another one and burn it. But the main thing is that he was sure that I would disappear. And while you are dead, he controls everything. Antonio nodded. The company, the assets, the signed documents, he has everything. But there's one problem. There was a board meeting in 2 weeks. Without my personal confirmation, some deals would be blocked. He either needs to convince everyone that I'm definitely dead, or finish what he started. Jane looked out the window. So he'll start looking, if he hasn't already. 2 days later, Alan brought back printouts, media clippings, internal company reports, employee testimonies. He looked tense. Stephen has a new initiative, he said, not hiding his irritation. He announced that he would soon present a new strategy for the corporation, supposedly agreed upon with you before he disappeared. It's a lie, but it looks neat. He's preemptive, Jane said. While everyone thinks you're dead, he's consolidating his control. Now pay attention, Alan continued, laying 3 photos on the table. All of them were of Jane. The first was at the newsstand. The second was at the payphone. The third was at the van at the dump. Someone started digging, he said quietly. These photos were taken covertly. Someone was tracking the place where you were found. Antonio clenched his fist. He's looking for me. Or her. Or maybe both. The next day, the doorbell rang twice, briefly and sharply. Antonio froze. Jane raised her hand, not to open the door. Alan always knocks 3 times, she whispered. They hid. About 10 minutes later, Jane looked out the window. There was a black car, tinted, parked at the opposite house. A second later, it drove away. They moved at night. Alan gave the new address through a tramp in the park, not trusting the channels of communication to anyone. In the new location, a room above the auto repair shop, Jane saw Antonio's armor crack for the first time. He sat with his face in his hands and whispered, I was sure that I knew who my friend was. She sat down next to him. Sometimes it's easier to survive on the street, because here you immediately see who is who. You don't expect good from people, but you did. He nodded silently. Was Stephen always jealous? She asked. Yes, but I thought he would grow out of it. We were both on the rise, at different paces, but together. I helped him, shared, and he saved. What did he lose when you were around? Antonio looked at her with understanding. Everything that I couldn't achieve myself. On the 5th day, they launched a counterattack. Alan arranged a meeting with the company's former IT director, who had been fired by Stephen the year before. The meeting took place in the basement of a coffee shop on the outskirts of Santa Monica. The man, Tom, was cautious but talkative. Stephen was cleaning out archives, deleting old internal correspondence, cleaning out internal chats. I suspected he was preparing for something, he said. There was one file he really wanted to delete. I copied it before I left. I'm not sure there was anything criminal in it, but you're clearly looking for it. Tom handed over the flash drive personally. They looked through it on an old laptop with the Wi-Fi turned off. Among the many work correspondences, they found several strange chains. From Stephen Harrisa to unknown secure mail. Subject, date X. Text, only after confirmation. Everything must look like an accident. Leave a minimum of traces. Jane looked at Antonio silently. Will this be enough? Not yet, he replied. But it's a crack in his facade. If there's one more confirmation, he'll be in trouble. On the sixth day, they tried to contact them directly. Someone called the phone number left, only for contact with Alan. One call, no voice. Then a second, 10 minutes later. On the third, a message. You're dead. Die properly. Jane deleted the message first. That means he already knows you're alive, and now there are 2 of us on the list. Antonio looked at the phone screen. There's only one move left, to appear in public, but not as a victim, but as a punch in the face, right in front of the camera. She looked at him carefully. Do you have a plan? Almost. But we need someone who will make noise. A reporter. Independent. Tough. I know one. If he believes us, Stephen is finished. The journalist's name was Jason Curtis. In the past, he was a lone investigator who was fired from a major television company after a conflict with management. Since then, he had his own YouTube channel and blog, which had quite a large audience. He was respected for his directness and disloyalty to games with power and money. Antonio wrote him a letter by hand. No phone, no electronic trace. Jane delivered it via a trusted courier. The letter contained only a few words. I'm alive. I have proof. This is not a setup. Set up a meeting. T. The answer came the next day. The meeting was in a hangar on the grounds of the former Hawthorne Airport. It all looked like a movie, but it was real. Curtis came in wearing a black jacket, with a GoPro camera in his pocket and a voice recorder in his hand. When he saw Antonio, he only raised an eyebrow. Well, holy shit. They say you were buried. Almost, Antonio replied. I want you to tell me the truth, but not now. First, you must see that this is not a performance. Antonio handed over the flash drive, the CCTV photos taken before and after the disappearance, and the transcripts of Stephen's text messages. Curtis leafed through them in silence. Jane watched. He didn't ask stupid questions. He just absorbed them. If this gets out on the air, Jason said finally, you'll start a war. He won't give in. He'll try to take you out again, and maybe everyone around him. He already tried, Jane said quietly. Curtis looked at her, holding his gaze. Who are you? The one who found him in the dump. He nodded as if everything became clear. Okay. Then listen carefully. I will publish everything. But you need to appear. On video. Not as the escapee, but as the accuser. Without that, it's just another leak. Antonio looked at the floor, then looked up. I'm ready. The recording was prepared in the evening. The location was the same hangar. The cameras were simple, with independent power supply. The background was gray concrete and semi-darkness. Antonio's speech was short. My name is Antonio White. You think I'm dead. But I'm alive. What happened was an assassination attempt. I know who's behind it. And I have proof. This video is not a sensation. It's a warning. The truth is coming. I'll be back. And I'll tell everyone by name. 2 hours after the publication, the internet exploded. The video was getting hundreds of thousands of views. The media began to pick up on it. CNN, CBS, even Fox News. Everyone was asking the same question. Is Antonio White alive? And if he is alive, who was in the coffin? Stephen responded with lightning speed. The next day, he gave an interview. I hope it's true. If Antonio is alive, I'm the first one to be happy about it. But until there's official confirmation, we can't risk the company's safety based on unverified information. He spoke like a politician. He smiled. He was calm. But Antonio knew him too well, from the nervous movement of his hand, from the way he fidgeted with his cuff. Stephen was afraid. There was a knock on the apartment door at night. Jane woke up first. This time, no knocking, no ringing, just the scraping of a key in the lock. Someone was trying to open the door. "Get back," she whispered. "There's someone here." They ran out the back stairs. They walked around the building, hid in a nearby garage. 30 seconds later, a figure in a black jacket appeared in front of the front door. Not the police. Not the courier. "Professionals," Antonio exhaled. Jane took out her phone. She took a couple of pictures through a crack in the shutters. Then she sent them to Alan. He called back 5 minutes later. "He's a former security guard from your company. Stephen used him as an independent contractor." "You were right, Jane. The hunt is official now." Jane was no longer just a savior. She was a witness, a partner, part of a team. With each passing day, something inside her was changing. She was no longer just surviving. She was taking action. She had a plan, a purpose, a role. Antonio was changing too. His former coldness gave way to an anxious attention to details. He listened to Jane more and more, asked for advice more and more often, and sometimes he just looked at her, for a long time, without words. On the 10th day after the video, everything exploded completely. Alan, through an old acquaintance in Stephen's circle, gained access to an important element, a duplicate of the share transfer contract, signed after the date of Antonio's death. The document was a forgery, and the signature too. "This is the end," Antonio said, looking at the printout. "He won't get away with this." "Don't rejoice too soon," Jane said. "The end is when you are officially recognized, and when he will answer according to the law. Then there's one last thing left. Live broadcast. Me and him. Face to face." Los Angeles was gray that day. The sky was flat, as if the city were waiting. Journalists had gathered outside the white media group. For the first time in weeks, it had been officially announced. A living Antonio White would address the board of directors and the press. Antonio was calm, in a lawyer's suit, with documents under his arm and the face of a man who no longer had anything to lose. Next to him was Jane, dressed simply, with a straight back and an attentive gaze. She was not hiding, and she was not running away. "Are you ready?" she asked. He looked at her and nodded. "Only thanks to you." Inside is a conference room, glass walls, microphones, cameras. Stephen is on the podium. He started first. He spoke beautifully. He was glad his friend was back, that it was all a mistake, and that he always hoped Antonio would be found alive. Antonio remained silent for a while. Then he stood up. "Stephen," he began, looking him straight in the eye. "You said you hoped I was alive. Then explain how you signed the papers knowing I was dead. Or as you said, possibly dead." Stephen turned pale. "It's a lie. You disappeared. We didn't know." "Yes, they did." Antonio put the flash drive and printouts on the table. "Here are your correspondence. Here is the forged contract. Here is the witness who confirmed the forgery of the signature. I was alive, and you knew. Because it was you who killed me." The room froze. Someone turned off Stephen's microphone. Jane looked into the face of the man who had sent the men in black to them a week ago, and now he was shaking. "I won't let you," he began, but his voice broke. "You've done enough already," Antonio said. The official investigation began that evening. Stephen was arrested 2 hours later. Attempted death, forgery, attempted murder. His lawyers tried to stall for time, but the media were already making headlines. Sensation. Billionaire survived assassination attempt. He was saved by a homeless woman. A week later, in his first big interview, Antonio said a simple phrase. "I didn't survive because I was rich. I survived because one man, a man on the street, decided that someone else's life was still worth something. That person was Jane. When it was all over, she didn't know where to go. The van where it all started had long since burned down, whether by accident or not. She had no relatives, no friends, only memories. Antonio found her himself, in the park. She was sitting on a bench with a backpack like before. "What now?" she asked. He sat down next to me and handed me a piece of paper. "This is the key to the apartment. It's yours now. The address is Northern Westchester. It's safe. There's a kitchen, a shower, and an old chair. I think you'll like it." "For what?" "For what you did." I didn't ask. "That's exactly why you deserve it." 2 months have passed. The apartment was quiet. The windows overlooked the courtyard, where sparrows cried in the morning. In the kitchen was an old coffee pot. In the cupboard were books, whose covers she had only seen before. On the wall was a single photograph, Jane and Antonio standing by an abandoned hangar. He was holding a folder. She was holding a cup of coffee, and both were smiling. He came sometimes, not often, without security, with a regular pizza and the words, "Let's have dinner like a homeless person." They didn't talk about the future, only about what had been, about the streets, about betrayal, about how easy it is to lose yourself, and how hard it is to find yourself. But there was no bitterness in their conversations. There was only truth and silence. The same silence that had been lacking in both mansions and vans. And one day Jane thought, maybe this is home. Not a place, but a moment. When you know you're not alone anymore.